Okay, I do believe we are live. Welcome everyone to another Sunday morning live stream. Today we're going to be making some beats inside of Beatmaker 3, and we're going to be sampling some sounds out of the vintage Quasimidi Quasar from 1994. And let's see here. We're going to be triggering those sounds today using the Novation SL MK3 Midi controller. And we're going to be doing potentially some creative macro mapping today using the Novation Launch Control Midi controller inside of Beatmaker 3 as well. Let me go ahead and show you the groove that I've got started here. And let's see if you guys can hear this okay. It's going to get loud in 3, 2, 1. Just a really basic techno groove that I've got started. Hey, what's happening, Sky Tortoise Ferryman? What's happening, Wall? We've had a change of time here in the United States this morning. It's our twice a year daylight savings time. So we went back an hour this morning. So I lost an hour of sleep last night. And for those of you who are not in the U.S., we should be an hour early today. But this is 10 a.m. here now. And for the next 6 months or so, this is going to be the scheduled time for this live stream. And let's see here. All right. So let me see if I can explain what I've got started so far. If you guys can just let me know if you can hear me and you can hear the music okay. Is the music loud enough? Is my voice loud enough? Oh, new monitors in the house. All right. Well, congratulations on that. That can make a lot of difference in how accurately you can hear your sound. This is a 123 beats per minute groove that we're working with. And I've just got 3 really simple samples here. We've got a kick drum sample. We've got another kick drum sample, so I can kind of do a variation on the kick drums. And we've got a little percussion kind of groove. Whoops, let me hold that down rather. And when we put that all together, it sounds a little bit like this. Hey, what's happening, Nick? All right. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to go ahead and sample some more sounds out of the vintage Quasimidi Quasar. I'm not exactly sure what type of stuff we're going to be sampling, but I do know one thing for sure, and that is we're going to be sampling a lot more percussion and drum sounds because I'm in the mood for rhythm today, and we're definitely going to make this into like a really percussion heavy groove. Probably some other melodics along the way as well, but definitely some percussion, and that's what we'll be starting with today. Let's see here. Let me switch cameras so you can see what I'm doing inside of Beatmaker 3 to get ready for recording. In fact, before we do that, let me just note that sitting on top of the Quasimidi Quasar here is a Novation Audio Hub 2x4, and this is an audio interface that the iPad is connected to. We've got the audio coming out of the Quasar, and that's going into the audio interface, and that's how we're getting the audio out of the Quasar into the iPad. I've got the Novation SL MK3 Midi controller, Midi synced up to the Quasar so that I can play the sounds from it here on this keyboard. And what we're going to be doing is we're just going to go ahead and choose, I think, maybe this pad here to record a sound onto. We're just going to be working in a really simple one-bank workflow today, just recording sounds onto the pads and then arranging these sounds out. And again, maybe doing some creative macro mapping using the Novation Launch Control Midi controller over here so we can get maybe some cool tweaking happening on these sounds. Let's go ahead and get ready to record onto the 3rd pad, shall we? We're going to go to the 2nd window, which is our sampling tab, and up here there's a little record button, which if we click at the top, there's a recording source. We can choose hardware input, and we can make sure that the audio interface is selected there. And let's see here. We can see that there's some level coming into Beatmaker 3, but we can't hear that at this time. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that we click the monitor button. And now we can hear the audio that's coming into this pad. And what we can do is we can press play down here at the bottom and we can start the groove going so that I can play along with the groove or maybe figure out what I want to play. And let's see here, if I change the cameras now, you can see that I'm, triggering sounds, and what we're doing is we're triggering this clap sound out of the Quasimidi Quasar. And what I think we're going to do today is start off, by sampling this clap, but also I think we're going to start out by sampling two versions of the clap. So it's going to sound a little bit less static. Yeah, cool. So what I'm doing there is I'm using the controller to trigger the clap on like a G sharp and then like a G on the next one. So we're going to get two different variations of the clap that are 1/2 step apart in pitch. And what that's going to do is when we triggered the claps in our bar now, it's going to give a very, very, very subtle sort of call and response to the groove as that clap sort of changes pitch. Let's go ahead and sample clap number 1 here by hitting the start button. I'm just going to go ahead and get it recording there by triggering, and now we can see on the screen that we're recording. I don't like to use the threshold way of recording. Let me switch the camera here. I prefer to just do it in manually and then trim everything out manually. So we're going to go ahead and hit this key here, and we're going to press the recording so that it stops the recording, and we'll close this out, and now we'll just edit out that clap here. We're going to go into the edit menu, start by trimming that, and then we're just going to start trimming this out. And trim, okay. And we're going to start zooming way into the beginning of that sound so that we can cut off all of the air in the very front of that sample. And we're going to take our time today. This is going to be a super, super casual session, you guys. We're just going to be recording samples. We're going to be editing these samples. We're going to be renaming the samples and saving the samples properly inside of Beatmaker 3 so that we don't have any samples gone missing and whatnot. Let's see here. Got a little bit too much air at the end. That's better, so we're going to go ahead and trim that down. I'd like the sample to be a little bit louder, so I think we might go ahead and just normalize that to maybe -1 decibels. Yeah, cool. A lot louder there. And I think we'll also just kind of zoom in and highlight the tail of this sound and go process and just do a fade out real quick. Just going to check the chat and make sure that you guys can hear me and everything. Hey, what's happening? We got DJ Fall in the house. We got Wall in the house. We got Sean in the house. We got Keith in the house. We got Head Nods Flying Circus in the house. All right. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Sky Tortoise Ferryman. Cool. All right, you guys. So what we're going to do now that we've recorded this clap sample, it just kind of puts an arbitrary default name at the top, like Audio Hub 2x4, and then it puts a bunch of numbers like the date or something. But we're going to go ahead and rename this and save it to the main sample directory here. And we're going to give this a name. We're going to call this Quasar Clap, I don't know, 01, why not? And now what we need to do is we need to navigate to that directory and re-drag the sample onto this pad so that Beatmaker 3 knows what directory this sample is in when it tries to load the session in future sessions. This is going to make sure we don't get any of those, like missing sample errors. So if we go to our documents folder and then we just go to our samples folder, this is where we just save that sample. We could, if we wanted to, go to the edit, we could highlight all the samples that we're, going to record today, and then we could move those to their own specific folder if we wanted to, to keep things a little bit neater. But to go, quickly today for the live stream, we're going to go ahead and just not worry about that and just save all of the samples into the default main sample folder inside of Beatmaker 3. So here we have Quasar Clap 01 that we just recorded. I'm just going to drag that onto the third pad here. It's pretty loud, so we're going to go ahead and bring the volume on that down just a little bit. And now we're going to go ahead and switch to the next pad over. And remember I said I wanted to record two different versions of this clap, 1/2 step apart in pitch. Let's go ahead and record this second one now. Got the audio window open for the pad that I want to record on. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the start button. It's now waiting for a signal. I'm going to give it a signal so that it knows we're recording. Just wait a second here. and record that second clap. Hit recording again so that it stops. We can X this out. There's that clap sample we want, so we'll just start trimming it out. We'll go into the edit screen and we'll go trim. I'm not going to go super slow today because I've already done some really beginner friendly and getting started stuff on Beatmaker 3 over the last couple of months and the 2 live streams that we did recently. So we're going to be moving at a pace that assumes you're a little bit familiar with the app, so we can get a little bit more done today, hopefully. Let's go ahead and trim that and hear this. We can trim quite a bit of that tail off. Cool. Let's trim that again. And let's do quite a bit of zooming in here by tapping on the plus. And then we're going to tap the far left button to get back to the beginning of the sample. Maybe a little too much there, so I zoomed out. We're going to trim this. And basically, I'm just trying to get, right into the very beginning of this sample here. You can see there's a tiny little bit of air there at the beginning still, so we're going to go ahead and trim that off. I'm going to go trim, and let's zoom back out again. Let's just do a tiny little fade out on the end of this sample just because I like to make sure that there's absolutely no way that we're going to get any sort of clicks or pops happening in the samples as we're playing them back. And let's also just go ahead and normalize this clap to -1 decibel as well, so we get it a little bit louder by default. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and now save the sample in our main sample directory, just like we did with that first clap. We're going to call this Quasar clap 02. Whoops. 02. Cool deal. And now what we need to do is we need to go reload the sample from the directory that we just saved it in, okay? So we're just going to go back to our, main sample directory here. If you were in the default documents folder with your inbox and your, samples and sessions and all this, it's just documents, and then samples, and here's your main samples folder. It can get a little bit cluttered if you're just sampling over and over again into this folder, so you might want to think about, instead of saving the samples here, to come back here and then edit and select these sounds and then choose move and then go to some other folder where you'd like to actually move the sounds. But we're not going to be doing that today. We're just saving everything into the main sample directory. So we're going to grab Quasar clap number 2, and we're going to drag that onto the next pad. And then it's a little bit loud there, so we're going to bring the decibels down on this the tiniest little bit. Now remember I was talking about how we were going to do this for the purpose of creating a little bit of a call and response in the groove. I mean, this is very subtle. You barely hear it. It's not like we're doing a huge pitch shift between the claps. But one of the things that we can do, to further, emphasize that call and response is not only can we have these pitches being the tiniest bit different, but we could also maybe pan one of these like 3 to the left and the other one maybe like 3 to the right. This is super subtle, and all of these little tiny details really help add up to a really polished mix in the end. I've already got this session named so that I can save it. So I'm a chronic oversaver, and I encourage you all to be chronic oversavers as well. So I'm just going to be clicking the save button quite often in here so that we don't lose anything. Now you might also notice that I've done a little bit of coloring on these pads, and we're going to continue to do that throughout this session today. We're going to go highlight the pad that I'd like to change the color on and choose the color section. And now Beatmaker 3 has these cool palette options, and I've got one of them set up in a neat way that just kind of puts a gradient on the color scheme here. So we're going to go ahead and keep filling in that gradient, and then I'm going to go ahead and save. Sounds nice and clear though. All right, thanks, Sean. Let's see here. The frame rate seems off. Receiving a fuzzy stream. Well, I don't really know what to do about that, guys. Let me know if that keeps up. There's not really much I can do about the stream. Quality, if my internet connection is slow today, that might have something to do with it. Is it still fuzzy, and are we coming through? And more importantly, can you hear this audio okay when I start the groove? As long as you can hear the audio, we're probably going to continue with the stream. But if you can't see the screen at all, please let me know, because I've got it set up in a way where it should be coming through pretty clear, as long as my internet is keeping up. Let's go ahead and bring the volume on these claps down just a little bit more. I think maybe -5 might be a good place to start then. Let's try that. Maybe the tiniest little bit more. So let's go -6 on both of these claps here. And what I've got is we're in the arrangement view here. We can see that I just got a 4-bar loop. So if I go ahead and just hit record. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. And it didn't seem to want to record that. That's odd. Oh, there we go. Oh, we're in. Alright. I still think these claps are a little bit louder than I would like them to be, so I'm going to bring them back another decibel. Alright. Maybe 2 decibels. And we'll add a little bit of reverb to them at this time, I think. Because I don't have any sort of effect sends set up in the mix, I'm going to hit the save button again. And let's see. Audio is great. It's raining here. Yeah. Not that bad. Hearing loud and clear. Okay, fantastic. I'm just going to keep going, everyone. Let me know if you can't see or if the stream gets a little screwy. Again, I don't really know what I'm going to be able to do about that. It might just be that my internet connection is a little bit slow today. So thanks for your patience, everyone. And what let's do is let's go ahead and get a reverb send going in our mix here, because I figure we're going to want to add some acoustic space to some of these sounds and probably get a lot of the percussion sounds that we record today going through some reverb. So if I go to the 4th tab here, the mixer tab, again, from what I said a little bit ago, we're going to go a little bit faster than normal today. This isn't going to be like a super beginner stream, but maybe more of an intermediate stream, because I'm assuming that a few of you, have potentially watched some of my other streams with Beatmaker 3 and maybe know a little bit of this stuff already. So we're going to go ahead and get a reverb send set up. I'm going to click on aux 1 and we're going to go to audio effects. It's already selected here at the top, aux 1. And what I want to do is I want to set up a reverb send. And the first thing that I like to do is to put an EQ before my reverb. And I have a little preset here in Beatmaker 3 where we're shaving off all of the low frequency content from this send. And this is really important because we don't want, like, when we're sending anything that has maybe some low frequency content, we don't want that really going through the reverb and creating mud in the mix. So if we shave off the low frequency content that's coming into our reverb send, it keeps things a lot more clean and keeps those low frequencies available in the mix for other things to take up that sonic frequency spectrum, like the kick drum and the bass and whatnot. And this way our reverb send won't start muddying those things up. We're going to go ahead and load a reverb at this time, and we've got quite a few options for reverbs here. I think maybe what we're going to just go ahead and go with today is the Eventide Black Hole reverb. We're going to go ahead and just load that up here and maybe take a look at these factory presets. Maybe just load the Black Hole preset and see what that does to start us off with here. If we go ahead and press play now and I start sending some of those things to the reverb, we can get this dialed in. In the mixer view here, if I double tap the bank, we can get a view, an actual, mixer channel view of all of the sounds. And I can see that our clap 1 is on this channel and our clap 2 is on the next channel. So if I go ahead and start sending some reverb to these, that's weird. Everyone else is seeing that anomaly with me as well, right? Just like the new update, they've got some sort of glitch here on the, this is a brand new update, by the way. We're using version 3.015 or something like that. But here I am muting in the mixer, and instead of just muting the tracks that I want, it's muting all of the tracks. And that's not what I want. So maybe we can solo instead. Actually, I see what's happening. Maybe we just want to, yeah, okay, cool deal. There we go. What I did is I muted the actual bank, the main bank channel, and not just the channels in it. So that's not a glitch. That's just my user error. But here we can start to see this reverb, rather hear this reverb coming through, right? So maybe we can do some adjusting here. Or try a few different presets. Ooh, I kind of like that bigger one, actually. This one kind of has like a pullback on it. Dun, 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 which kind of adds a little bit of a rhythmic element almost, and I really like that. So what I think we're going to do is just pull back the amount that we're sending to these claps and maybe go with that. Yeah. This is our sort of rhythm kind of groove here. Maybe we'll put a little reverb on this as well. Doesn't seem to want to come through when it's soloed. Maybe just a tiny little bit, just to sort of keep that in the same acoustic space that we've just sort of created for these clap drums, for these claps to sit in. I'm going to go ahead and save at this time. Hey John, we got Foxy Nirvana in the chat, we got Joshua in the chat. Hey everyone. Audio and picture perfecto. Thank you very much. All right. Hearing loud and clear with no buffering. Great. Fantastic. All right. Let's see what else we can do here. We've added these two different claps, which might be a little loud still, actually, considering that I definitely want to add some more sounds to this. Let's bring the volume on these claps down just a tiny bit, shall we? Maybe one more decibel. Maybe another decibel. Right, I want these claps loud, but I want to leave room in the mix for other sounds as well. So we're just going to balance them, I think, right about here for now. And what let's do now is let's go ahead. Oops, I can't see what that camera is doing to that angle. There we go. Let's go ahead and assign our MIDI knob controller here. This is the Novation launch control. And if we go into the menu on Beatmaker 3, over here we have the first page is for our audio and MIDI devices. Excuse me. We can make sure that the launch control is connected, you know, which it is. And then over here in the second tab of our settings window, we've got these MIDI focus actions. And what we can do here is we can assign like these trigger pads so that they can, you know, play the pads inside of Beatmaker 3. And we can assign these knobs so that when we move a knob, it can do cool stuff inside of Beatmaker 3. And that's what we're going to do right now. We've got this already connected. In fact, let me show you. In the Novation Audio Hub 2x4, one of the things that I really like about this audio interface and why they call it an audio hub is that it has a built-in USB hub, so I don't need to use a separate powered USB hub to connect my controllers to the iPad. Using this audio interface does that, and that's definitely one of the reasons why I love these, and I'm not sure why they discontinued it, because I still think, even though it's been discontinued for a couple years now, that it's still the best audio interface for using with iOS stuff. I really love using this interface. We're going to go ahead and click on macro control number 1, and now it's blinking, and it's waiting for me to turn a knob on the MIDI controller. So I turn the knob on the MIDI controller, and it recognizes that and assigns that knob to that macro inside of Beatmaker 3. So we can do 5 to 5, 6 to 6, 7 to 7, and 8 to 8. And now I've got the first row of 8 knobs here assigned to Beatmaker 3, and we can do stuff with these. And let's go ahead and do just that. Let's take our main kick drum here, and let's make it so that when I, roll this knob here, that it sort of mutes the kick drum. And this way, in real time, at any time in the mix here, I can just take out the kick drum and create little turnarounds and whatnot as we're grooving. And there's a section here where we can change the volume of the sound, right? The gain. And if I double click on this, we can now assign this to a macro control. Let me show you here what I mean. I keep changing the camera. So over here, I'll show you again here. If I want to assign this gain control knob to an actual, physical knob on the controller, we're just going to go ahead and double tap on that gain knob. And down at the bottom, it says macro controls. We're going to click that, and I can assign this now to any one of the 16 macros inside of Beatmaker 3. Now we're going to go ahead and assign this to macro 8, which if I change the camera again is this far one here over on the side. And now what I need to do is go back, let's see if I can change the camera again. Down here in the bottom corner, there's a little section that says macros. Okay, and if I click that, it brings up the first set of 8 macros, and we've assigned one of them, and it's lit up here at the bottom. It says gain, and if I click these 3 knobs down at the bottom, it's going to allow me to adjust some settings here. And I want the minimum setting to be exactly where it was when we had it. Not assigned, which was -1 decibel for the volume. And I want it, when I move the knob, I want it to remove the kick drum. So I want, when I turn the knob, when I turn this knob, I want the volume of the kick drum to go away, right? So in here, I'm going to make it so the final destination, it'll start at -1, and when I turn the knob, it's going to go all the way down to 0. Now I can go ahead and, if I'm not mistaken, we can click on that and rename this. So instead of just saying gain, it can actually say kick volume. That makes a little bit more sense, when we're looking at it here on the, screen, that we know that we're affecting the kick drum volume. And let's see what happens if I go ahead and play and we turn the knob. So what should happen is the kick drum should go away in 1 and okay, so now at any time during the groove, we can 1, 2, 3, and bring that kick in and out in real time. I hope that made sense, and we're going to do some more assigning of macros as we keep going today as well. In fact, let's go ahead and assign the play and stop to some buttons on this controller over here. I kind of find that's a fun thing to do. I'm going to catch up with the chat in just 1 second after we assign a couple more macros here. Change the camera so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. If I scroll down here, we can see all sorts of options that we can assign things to in our controller. What I'm looking for is way down here at the bottom in the transport section. There's a transport for play, and if I click that, it's now waiting on a button from my Midi controller. I'm going to go ahead and choose this button here, and it recognizes that inside of Beatmaker 3. Now I'm going to choose the transport control for stop, and I'm going to press another button on my Midi controller. Now without touching Beatmaker 3, I'm just going to press play on the Midi controller, and you can see here there that we're starting Beatmaker 3. And I can also press stop on the Midi controller. So now we've got a start and stop on the Midi controller, and also I can remove that kick drum. Alright, so we can stop it. I'm probably gonna just by default habit be pressing stop and play up here a lot as well as we keep going. But now that we've made those assignments and done a few more samples, I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. And I think we can go ahead and maybe search for another sound. Before we do, let me real quick try to check in with the chat. Yeah, unfortunately, I have one controller that has endless knobs. It's like a really old Behringer CMD DC1 DJ style MIDI controller, and it has endless encoders. I've always been kind of excited about maybe being able to use that one with Beatmaker 3 because it has pads that match the 16 pad layout in Beatmaker 3. But unfortunately, it's sending out like a fixed value, so it's not 100% compatible with endless encoders yet, but I've been working with the developers and shot them a little video of like how mine is not working per se, so we'll see if maybe they can get that updated. But I know that it is now working with some MIDI controllers that have those endless knobs, and that's awesome. And the fact that they're working on the app on any level and continuously, just still trying to update it and stuff, that's a big thumbs up in my book. Okay, let's see here. Maybe we'll go ahead and scroll for another sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just play the groove, and we're just going to scroll for some other sounds here on the Quasar and see if anything sort of jumps out at us. Hey, what's happening, Tony? What's happening, Russ? All right. Now, we don't hear anything by default. Excuse me while I just keep randomly flailing on the camera angles. And the reason that we don't hear anything by default is I've got the Quasar, routed into the iPad, but by default, we need to pick which pad we're recording on and tell Beatmaker 3 to monitor that audio. So we're going to go ahead, I think, and just, maybe record onto this empty pad here. I'll go to the second tab to get the sampler page open. We're going to click on record, okay? And we've already set the audio recorder to know that we're recording from the Audio Hub 2x4. But again, if we didn't, we would just click that and we would select hardware input, and then your audio interface is going to be listed there. We can get the groove playing down here at the bottom by play and stop, or I can use the Midi controller here as well that we've assigned, and I can play and stop the groove as well. And if I press, let's see here, if I press monitor on here, now we can actually hear the sound that's coming in. And what I can do is I can go ahead and just maybe scroll through some other sounds here on the Quasar. Ooh, wait a minute. It's kind of an old school. Ooh. I kind of like. You guys know I love to get that sort of impact sound in. I think we're going to sample this old school crash real fast. We're just going to go start, and I'm just going to tap it to get it going. I don't like to use the threshold feature. I like to trim mine manually. And we're going to go ahead and just record that in. Maybe higher up. Here we go. Yeah, there. Cool. It sounds like it's a little bit more in key with our groove. But we didn't get it. Let's try again. Alright. Did we get it that time? Cool. Alright, so here we have that little crash sound now, and we're just going to start trimming this out. We're going to go into the editor, and let's see here. I'm going to zoom in a bunch with the little plus button, and then I'm going to go all the way back to the start of the sample with the left button over here, and we're just going to start zooming in and trimming out this sample. I'm going to zoom in a little further, go back to the very beginning. You can see there's that tiny little bit of dead air there before the sample starts. We're going to get in all the way and trim that out. For those of you who missed the beginning, we're going to go slow today, and we're going to be like resaving all the samples properly and reloading them all properly so we don't get any missing sample errors in the track. Cool. We're going to go ahead and trim this out. All right. Whoops. Trim. And we're going to bring the volume up on this a bit. If I choose the normalize section here, I don't have to normalize it all the way up to 0 dB. We can use this as sort of a gain feature, and I can normalize this, I don't know, arbitrarily. I'm just going to pick -3 dB, and it's going to get our sample quite a bit louder there. All right. That's what I'm looking for. We're going to go ahead and maybe grab from the end of the sample, leave that huge section at the end of air, and we're going to go ahead and do a fade out on that. Bring the start point back to the beginning, and here we're going to save the sample now. We're going to save it in our main sample directory. I'm just going to give this a name. We'll call this Quasar Crash 01. Okay, fantastic. And now we just need to reload this sample onto whatever pad we want it to be in. And this is going to prevent that, missing sample errors that kind of happens sometimes if you're not super careful. We're going to go to our main samples folder and find the crash, Quasar Crash 01. I'm going to highlight that. And I think I want to clear out this pad before we move forward, so I'm just going to clear that pad. Then I'm going to drag the crash up here to the upper right pad instead. Fantastic. We're going to go ahead and bring the volume down on this crash by about maybe 3.5 decibels. We're going to pan this crash maybe like 10 to the right. We're going to go ahead and put a high pass filter on this crash as well. So let's go high pass and just roll off any of those super low frequencies that may be hiding out in the sound that maybe we couldn't hear. Let's also change this from a one shot to a hold. And that means that by default, it's not going to play the entire length of the sample every time we hit it. But that's not really why I did that. Why I did that is because changing it from one shot to hold gives you access to the amplitude envelope down here. So I do want the sound to play in its entirety every time we hit it. So I'm going to bring the release way up on that, maybe like 8 seconds. right? Now it plays back the sample, no problem. But what I want to do is just soften the attack on that so it's not quite as, when it hits, that the transient isn't quite so aggressive. Just going to soften that ever so gently there. Fantastic. And if we press play now, all right, what we can do is we can open up our pattern window here. We can just kind of zoom a bit with the pinch and zoom here. We can see that our crash is up here on pad 16. And let's see here. We can also see that I don't have, let's see, I'm trying to make an 8-bar loop here, what it looks like. So let's go ahead and make this happen, shall we? We're going to go back to song mode, and we're going to go ahead and stretch out the loop itself to be an 8-bar loop. I'm going to stretch out that loop brace on top of the loop so that it knows that we're looping on 8 bars. If we double-click back into the pattern, before we worry about the crash, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that these claps are running for the full 8 bars. We're going to use the change the cursor rather from the grab tool to the highlight tool, and we'll see over here on the left, you know, it says the names of the samples. So on pad 3 and 4, we've got clap 1 and clap 2. I'm going to go ahead and just highlight that series of claps there. I'm going to hit duplicate, and then I'm going to tap that, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to put those claps where I want them to be on the next set of 4 bars there. Okay, we're just going to verify now that the claps are where they need to be. So I'm just going to play in the background. If they sound off or something, I'll fix that. We're going to go ahead and zoom in again, and we'll see that our crash is here. So all I need to do is just put a dot on that very first downbeat and pull that, you know, out so that it holds the sample down for that amount of time. Yes, you got that, Rap. This app looks a lot like the MPC Live. Absolutely. There's a lot of similarities between the workflow in Beatmaker 3 and the workflow in the MPC series. For example, what we've got here is we've got what looks to be 16 pads. But we can change that to a 64 pad layout really easily if we want to. And we can even go up to the second page, and we actually see here that we have up to 128 pads that we can load sounds onto in one bank alone. And I could just keep adding banks, and if we wanted, we could have all the drums in one bank, and all the synths in one bank, and all the basses in one bank, and all the chords in another bank, and use those banks as, you know, mixer tracks and whatnot. But what I like to do is I like to just continually just keep sampling onto the pads in one bank, since we can affect and mix everything either way, whether we do it individually on the pads or whether we do it individually as an old school mixer style. Let's go ahead and color this pad to match the color scheme I've got set up here. There we go, so that it starts filling in this cool little gradient I've made. We're going to go ahead and save at this time as well. And I think what we'll do now that we've got that crash in is just keep scrolling through some more sounds in the Quasar and see if anything else sort of stands out and sounds cool. Just kind of start the groove here. In fact, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of reverb to that Quasar crash, shall we? And maybe take a little bit more low frequencies off of it as well. 2, 3, and yeah, we're getting there. I want to have a little bit more reverb on it still, I think, and maybe high pass up to about 900 hertz, and maybe bring that volume down. All right. Just listening for that crash. Still a little bit too loud, I think, and I want to maybe soften that attack the tiniest little bit more. Maybe take out a tiny little bit more low frequency content there. And 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a little bit better. All right. Let's go ahead and save. Now to hear whatever sounds we're playing in the Quasar, I'm going to need to pick a pad. Let's pick this one here. We'll hit record. We're going to make sure that it's got our audio interface selected. And it does. If I hit monitor now, we're hearing whatever I'm, playing out of the Quasar. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, but I think I do. It's a Giro, it's a Guiro, Giro. Just kind of scrolling randomly through sounds here. Kind of open hi-hat there. Kind of like that sound. That's cool. Let's sample that in. I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. We're going to hit start. Just going to tap it to get it recording. Cool. We're going to hit recording again to get it to stop. There's the sample I want right there. Whoops. I'm going to go into the edit and I'm going to stop that here and go trim. And now we're just going to start trimming this out. Start zooming in and trim. Cool. Trim again, and let's do some more zooming in. If I press the little left button here, it puts us back to the very, very beginning point of the sound. Get right in there and hit trim again. Fantastic. Now let's make this sound a little bit louder by default. We're going to go process and normalize. Now we don't have to maximize it all the way to 0 decibels. I can make it a little bit louder, maybe arbitrarily pick -4 decibels. Okay, that's got it quite a bit louder as we can see, right? And here. And what we're going to do, I think, is just trim off a little bit more at the end. And then highlight this sort of end section here and do a process and a fade out. Make sure it's just super, super clean and there's absolutely 0 possibility of any clicks or pops coming through in the sound. Now we're going to go ahead and save this so we make sure that we don't get any sample missing errors or anything like that. We're going to go ahead and click the 3 dots and we're going to put this in the main sample directory. Let's call this Quasar closed hat thing 01 because it's really not a hat. It's some other kind of sound that I'm using as a hat. And now that we've labeled that, we just need to go find that from our actual sample directory, and then we can drag it onto the pads. So we're going to go up here to the sample directory. Again, if you're in the main directory with your exports and focus action templates and all that, it's just samples down here. And this can get pretty filled up if you're doing a lot of sampling. So we're going to grab Quasar closed hat thing 01 and just drag it back onto that pad. Now we can go ahead and assign the color to keep matching the color scheme here because I'm being super geeky about that today. We're going to go ahead and click this one here and we'll click save at this time. We're going to need to bring the volume on this way down. And I also want to use that high pass filter trick again. We're going to turn the high pass filter on here to high pass and make sure that there's no super low frequency content coming through in this sound. I'm going to go ahead and play the groove here and we'll get it in the mix. I'm going to go ahead and just hit record and we're just going to tap that in. Whoops. 1, 2, 3, and another 4 bars. All right. Let's go ahead and get that metronome off here. And what I'm trying to do is go to the mixer here so that I can put a little bit of reverb on that new sound. Oh, forget it. Can you guys hear that reverb on that new sound? I think that sounds pretty nice. That was weird. Go ahead and bring that sound down a little bit and maybe pan it like a tiny little bit to the left to give it its sort of own space in the mix. Maybe add the tiniest little bit of saturation to that sound, like put that up to 10%, and then bring the volume on that back a little bit more. Basically, we don't want it to be like a lead sound, and we still want to leave room in the mix for other sounds. Gonna hit save. Yes, it'll definitely be interesting to see how well Atom 2 integrates. I'm not sure it's going to integrate very well, to be honest with you. I don't know. I could be wrong. Alright, let's continue looking for some more sounds that we can sample into this groove. Let's make sure we're saved. I'm going to tap the next pad that we're going to record into. Go to the second page where the sample window's open here. Hit record. Hit the monitor button so that I can hear what I'm doing. And we'll just maybe scroll through some more sounds here. These are really old school sounds. The Quasimidi Quasar that I'm sampling from today is from 1994. So these are what, like 26, 27-year-old sounds that we're recording today? Oop. Might need more cowbell. Or might need some jingle bells. Kind of like that wood block. It's kind of a funky old open hi-hat sound. It's kind of lo-fi and weird. I think we're going to sample that sound in. So what I'm going to do is just hit the start button. Just tap a key so that it starts recording. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually record that sound in. Press recording again so that it stops. And there we can see that second sample that we just recorded. We'll start editing this out. Let's see here. Close this. Nope. Wrong window. And here we go. Back into the editing window. That's where I'm trying to get to. I'm going to go ahead and trim off some of the end of this sample. Keep trimming the beginning of this sample. Let's make it a little bit louder. So we'll do the normalize and maybe make this one, I don't know, -5. So it's quite a bit louder. Cool. We're going to zoom in a bunch with the plus button here. And use the little left button there to get to the very beginning of the sound. I think I can zoom in a tiny bit more. Yeah. I just want to get rid of this air from the beginning of the sample, basically. Cool. Trim. And yeah, nice. All right. Let's see how that looks. Trim out just a little bit more off the end there and go trim. And then we're going to grab this little bit of sort of dead air at the end of the sample and then just do a process and a fade out. Just making sure that it's absolutely perfectly clean and no possibility of clicks or pops at the end of the sound. We're going to go ahead and save this now. We're going to save it in our main sample directory. Let's just call this Quasar Open Hat 01. Cool. And what we need to do now is just go ahead and go into that menu so that we can drag the sample onto this pad. So here's our main sample directory, and we've got Quasar Open Hat 01. I can just sort of grab and drag that there. Cool. Now we can just click the 3 dots here and recolor this pad to sort of match the scheme of colors that I'm using today. We'll go ahead and save as well. And let's go ahead and get this ready. Let's bring the volume on this down a bit. And let's use a high pass filter on this as well. So we're going to go high pass. And just make sure that there's no low frequency content maybe hanging out in this sound or anything. It's also, I don't know, maybe a bit more open than I would actually like it to be. So maybe what we'll do is bring, let's see here, bring the end point in quite a bit. And maybe we'll change it from a one shot to a hold. And what that does is it makes it so that when we trigger it, it doesn't play in its entirety every time. It gives us control via the amplitude envelope here at the bottom. So I can make it play longer by moving the release, you know, and getting the full sample to play out. But if I bring this release way down, You can see that we're not triggering the full sample anymore. It's just kind of getting some of it, and I think that's what we're going to do. Cool, and maybe touch the attack up just a little bit and soften the beginning of the sound just a touch. All right, let's see if we can't play the groove here. All right, let's maybe take a little bit more low frequency content off. Cool, and maybe add a little bit of reverb to that sound by default. Cool, now if I go ahead and just hit record, 2, 3, and... one more. Didn't get it? And I missed a few in the beginning. Now it's timing those a little bit strange because we've got it on hold and not one shot. And let's see if we can't fix that here, shall we? Are those all the same? Yeah, it's got all those. Nope, they're a little different. Yeah, see, those ones that I recorded there are a little bit longer. So we're going to use the select tool. I think I've got double notes on that first one, in fact. And we're just going to delete those. Going to zoom in here a little bit, grab this next set. Actually, yeah, there's an extra one there. It's, 1, 2, 3. Hold on. Right, it's just these here that I want. And then we're going to duplicate those and bring these back to the first bar. Cool. Whoops. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Yeah, I know, Paul. I actually am missing that for this stream right now. I definitely want to tune into that and see what's up over there on the synesthesia. Anyone know if Complete Audio 6 works with Beatmaker 3? I'm not sure what the question is exactly. Complete is for the desktop. You can't load desktop plugins inside the iPad. So you wouldn't be able to load any of the complete desktop plugins on the iPad. What you can do is you can take some of them, what I've seen others do, is you can take some of the kits that are set up in Native Instruments Machine, and you can use a conversion tool called Kitmaker, I believe. And it sort of just like takes those 16 one-shots from that kit and puts those into Beatmaker 3 format. That's the only content that I think you can really sort of grab from the complete stuff and bring into Beatmaker 3 easily. Other than that, you're just kind of limited to loading stuff up on your computer, programming it there, and then either sampling it into Beatmaker 3 by taking an audio cable from your computer's audio interface and routing that audio cable into your iPad's audio interface and then just sampling it the same way that we're sampling audio here. Or you can, build things in Ableton and then render those out to like a WAV file or a loop and then just airdrop that over to your iPad. But as far as, getting those complete tools or plugins to work in Beatmaker 3, yeah, it's a no-go on that. Let's see here. I think we're going to do a tiny little bit of EQ on that new hi-hat sound. Save first. Yeah, we're going to bring the volume on this down a tiny little bit. And I'm going to bring up the audio effects tab. We're going to click up here in the, make sure I'm on the right page here. And we're going to click up here where it says aux 1. I've got the reverb send selected. And I want to choose just the pad that the hi-hat sound is coming on. So I'm going to choose select pad. And I'm going to find that sound, right? Quasar, open hat. Okay, and now I'm putting an effect on just this pad. I think we're going to go ahead and just make sure we save all the way first. So we've saved in case anything goes wrong. We're going to put an audio unit effect on this. We're going to scroll down, and we're going to use the FabFilter Pro Q3 EQ. And the reason that I like to use this one is you're going to see right here It gives me a nice visual representation of what the audio looks like. I'm going to go ahead and take off some of those low frequencies there. And I'm going to grab my Apple Pencil. Make sure that it's connected to the iPad. Cool. Now, if I hold my finger on the screen here, we can see it start to freeze some of these frequencies. And I can see, for instance, this kind of, as we go up to the top of these really high frequencies here, I can see this gigantic peak over here. And the plugin itself will even read out some of the numbers that it thinks you might want to take a look at, this little section here. And you can see that there's a really huge peak up at the top here at 22 kilohertz, and another kind of peak up here at 11 kilohertz. We can use the pencil to just grab those peaks and just sort of draw on the sound. So if I get the screen to sort of, freeze the audio like this, I can just sort of really gently and carefully bring some of the high frequency content on this hi-hat down. That's a lot more sort of in the mix sounding, I think. Yeah, that's a lot better. And we're pushing a lot less of those extreme high frequencies here. That's nice. By doing that, by taking that extra step and, EQing the sounds like that, it's going to give your other sounds the space that they need to breathe and to exist inside of your mix. And I really am a big advocate for doing a lot of EQ work. In fact, let's see here. If we select another pad, we can maybe select that closed hi-hat that we sampled today as well. Now on this one pad alone, I can go ahead and put another effect, and I can scroll down. We can scroll down and we can choose that FabFilter Pro Q3 again. We can press play on the mix. And now we're affecting just this one sound only. I have sort of a default setting that I like to use here. Go ahead and pull off some of those low frequencies there. And if I just hold on the image here, it sort of freezes the audio. And I can look at these really extreme peaks, and I can maybe tame these a little bit, right? Maybe pull these down just a little bit. Okay. So that our hi-hat doesn't have these giant resonant peaks here. This is sort of an art form. You're going to want to take your time and do this stuff slowly, especially if you don't really know what you're doing. And my best advice for working with EQ and trying to sort of tame your sounds is the idea that we want to work subtractively. You can see here that I'm taking frequencies away from the sounds so that it leaves space in the mix for other sounds to exist. I'm not necessarily boosting frequency content on any of these sounds. All we've done is taking content away from the frequencies of these sounds. Well, Jeremy, if you want to do, let's see here, if we close this bank, what I'm doing today is just working with one bank, right? And we're loading the different samples onto the pads, or sampling them rather. Now, if we go to the mixer page, you'll see we have our main out, and then we have a slot for the bank. But if I double click on where it says bank 1 at the top, now it opens up that bank, and every pad that we have assigned in that one bank is now here on the mixer. You can actually create up to 8 different effects sends if you want to, so that we can bus these tracks to any of those different 8 sends. We don't have groups per se, we just have buses inside of Beatmaker 3. So if you wanted to do groups, for instance, what you would do is you would use like bank 1 for your drums, maybe bank 2 for your basses, bank 3 for your synths and whatnot. I don't typically do it that way because I like to be able to use a Midi controller and assign things to the knobs. Now what happens is this is only relative to whatever bank we have selected inside of Beatmaker 3. So if I have my banks spread out, 4 or 5 different banks and I want to, move a knob that affects something on one of those banks, I'll need to make sure that that bank is selected first inside of Beatmaker 3. Select the bank and then twist the knob, and then maybe select a different bank and twist the knob. And that gets a little tedious for me personally. I like to know that when I've got something in Beatmaker 3, that anytime I move any knob, it's going to do what I expect. And since we can EQ everything individually, and since we can route everything to the buses, to the sends rather individually, this is how I've been doing it in just a one bank workflow. But this is just, how I do it to specifically keep these macros active at all times. Let's say, for instance, that we had the drums only on bank 1 and we had some other sounds on bank 2, right? And that we're playing the groove and that I'm maybe on the second bank where the basses are at and I want to bring the kick out. Well, when I change the knob, nothing's going to happen because I'm not on the drum bank. Whereas now, whoops, why did our macro go away? Let's find out. Because I'm not on the bank. See, that's why it didn't work, because I'm on the main out. See, so this is a great example. So here we are. I'm on the main out inside of Beatmaker 3, and I'm rolling my knob, that I've assigned to the kick drum for those of you who were here earlier, but nothing is happening inside of Beatmaker 3. And this is exactly why I like to use the one bank workflow. Because we just need to make sure that the bank we want to affect is selected. And if any other bank is selected, then whatever knobs you've routed, they're not going to go. They're only going to go if the bank you've assigned them to is highlighted. So when I'm doing this, we only use one bank so that the macros always work all the time, no matter what. So here we are playing the groove. And I can turn that kick off to... Now, it's not like I'm going to get to another bank and accidentally this won't be here because we're only using one bank. You follow? And 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's go. I think maybe this hi-hat could be pitched a little bit differently. Let's see if we can't pitch that up a little. Ooh, better. All right. I'm going to go ahead and save here. Maybe bring the volume on this down just a tiny little bit so that we're leaving room in the mix for other sounds still. Maybe bring that one down another decibel as well. Yeah. All right. Cool. Make sure we're saved here. And let's go ahead and scroll for another sound. Who knows what we're going to end up with. Let's just pick a pad. Go to the recording tab, the second tab here. Click on the recording and make sure that, we're still selected to our audio interface here. If I click the monitor button, now whatever I play over here on this side is coming through and we can hear it. So we can go ahead and just start scrolling for some new sounds. Who knows what we're going to find inside of this vintage box, Ooh, I like that. That's really nice. Okay, so what let's do, let's sample that hat in. I'm going to hit start. Now it just says waiting. It's just waiting for a signal. I'll just tap something to get it recording. Then I'll just hold that, open hi-hat the full way. Cool. Hit recording again to get it to stop. And now we can see there's that sample we want. Now what that does is it's like a threshold triggered recording. I don't like to use that method of recording myself because I like to, be able to physically see the sound and get in here and, trim it out myself manually. That's just a workflow preference for, being a sample maker for all these years. That's just how I've, come to do it. And definitely kind of an old school way to do it as well. Let's go ahead and get right in there on that sound and trim that out. Let's zoom in a bit to the beginning and get rid of all this air at the beginning of the sound. Zoom in just a little bit more. Get right in on the beginning of that sound and trim. Fantastic. Let's get all zoomed out here and grab the end of this sound, just the air there at the end, and go process and fade out. That's just an extra step to make sure that there's no possible way that we're ever going to get any clicks and pops at the end of the sample. If you don't do that last step, you might be surprised at hearing a little bit of clicks and pops in your music sometimes, and I definitely recommend doing that if you can. So we're going to go ahead and normalize this to bring up the volume, but we don't want to normalize it all the way up. Let's just go to -6, get it a little bit louder. Fantastic. Cool. Let's go ahead and save this now into our main sample directory. We're going to call this Quasar. Let's call this open hat 001A or something, right? And there we go. Saved into our main sample directory. All we need to do now is just re-drag from our directory onto the pad so that it sort of establishes where it's finding that sample from. So if we go open hat there and we just drag that on, now we can go to the second tab, and I can recolor this the way I've been sort of following this little gradient palette here. Go ahead and save, and let's see here. So we can play the groove and try to get this new sound in the mix. Also run a high-pass filter on this sound and get rid of any of those super low frequencies that may be hiding out in that sound. Cool. Let's also open up our mixer and assign that new hat to some reverb. Alright. Cool, let's go ahead and record that in. Let's go ahead and save that, shall we? Yeah, you can absolutely bounce stuff to audio, but the thing is that we're really only working with audio here. All we're doing is just, sampling things onto the pads, and then, using the Midi sequencer and the piano roll to just sequence where those one-shot samples, occur in the grid and the timeline. If you want, you can absolutely pick whatever you'd like and just render that to audio, and then bring that audio in as like a loop that you could then, further process or further chop up. Absolutely. Let's see here. What is it that I'm trying to... A little bit more reverb on that new open hi-hat sound. Yeah. Also, maybe bring the high-pass filter up a little bit more, and maybe pan that new sound a little bit to give it a little bit of, space in the stereo field. I'm talking very subtle, like just 5%. If you can move some of your sounds, anything but the kick or the snare, leave those right at 0. Or anything else, if you can maybe, or the bass too. But other sounds, if you can just kind of give them their own space in the stereo field, it really makes a big difference. Let's go ahead and put an EQ on this new sound, shall we? Select pad. We're going to select the Quasar open hat 1A here. Cool. Let's go ahead and put the Pro Q3 on that so we can take a look at these frequencies, shall we? Cool. You see there's a little bit of messiness up there that we're going to take care of. Bring out those lows. Cool. And I'll do the same thing that I did before. We're just going to kind of get the audio to freeze, visually here. And we can see that there's quite a bit of like extreme resonant peaks here in some of these high frequencies. Like we certainly don't want this giant peak here over here at 20 hertz, kilohertz rather. This is the kind of stuff that's going to fatigue your listeners' ears when you have these high frequency contents just, slamming through the mix like this. So let's take a moment and tame these a little bit, shall we? this high cut filter at the top, really extreme. And we're just gonna, yeah, just gonna shave off that tiny little bit at the very top there. Alright, maybe a little bit more taming on this section here. Oh, come on now. I find that using the Apple Pencil with this is absolutely essential. Trying to do it with your fingers is really tedious. Alright, that's quite a bit better. I think we can even give it a touch more reverb now. Yeah. Alright. Go ahead and save. Thanks, Luke. Okay, I think we can maybe go ahead and add another sound at this time. Let me just get a sip of coffee and thank everybody for tuning in. If you have any questions at all today, whether they be Beatmaker 3 related, MIDI controller related, or just music production related in general, please feel free to drop those in the chat and I'll do my best to answer those. I really appreciate everyone tuning in and hanging out. Okay, let's go ahead and we're just going to pick another pad that we can sample onto. I'm going to go ahead and choose the second window to get into the sampler page. We're going to click the monitor button. Fantastic. And now we'll just play the groove and scroll through some more sounds, shall we? Oh, forget about it. Yeah, I love a good shaker. Let's just go ahead and sample that right in, shall we? We're going to hit start. I'm just going to trigger it to get it recording there. And the reason I don't really like to do the, the monitor-based threshold recording is it can sometimes cut off the very, very beginning of your sample, and I don't want that to happen. So I'd rather just trim everything out manually. I'm going to go ahead and just sample that in, hit recording again to get it to stop. We can see way over here that that's the sample we want. So we're going to go ahead and go into this edit window to kind of fuss around sometimes to get that left side to close, to get all the controls to show up here. And we're just going to start trimming this out. Cool. Trim. Get right in here at the beginning and trim, and we're just going to do a little bit more zooming in, because even though it looks, while you're zoomed out, it looks like you've got it really nice, right? Well, I always take that time to get in there a little bit further, because when you zoom in a little bit further, you can actually see there was quite a bit of just dead air there at the beginning of the sample. And when you want everything to really lock into place and really lock onto the groove, you really want your samples to not have any sort of dead air at the beginning of them whatsoever. Let's trim a little bit of that air off the end as well. And let's just take this whole bit of air at the end and just do a fade out and check that. Cool. Let's go ahead and bring the volume up on this sound a little bit more. And let's normalize this to, let's say, oh, I don't know, negative like 5 decibels. Cool. Just get that a little bit louder. Let's go ahead and save this now in the main sample directory like we've been doing. We're going to call this Quasar Shaker 01. Cool. And now we just need to grab that sample where we've saved it, drag it back onto the pads so that we don't get any anomalies when loading the session next time. Here's our main sample directory, and I can grab Quasar Shaker 01, drag it back onto that pad. If we go to the second page here, we can make sure the pad is highlighted, go to the color section, and color that the same way that I've been filling in the pads with this little palette here. Save at the top there, and we can go ahead and play the groove and sort of seat this hi-hat in the mix. Actually, before we do that, let's do a little bit of panning. Let's pan this, say, 10 to the right, and also put that high-pass filter on here to get rid of any, low frequencies that could be just hiding out in the sound that maybe we're not hearing. We'll take out anything beneath about 700 kilohertz there, and we'll also maybe just put a little bit of reverb on that shaker sound by default. Oh, much better. Cool. Let's play the groove. Just trying to figure out what sort of a pattern we want here. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hit record, and we'll just tap that in. And yeah, I didn't get them all. That's okay. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and rather than try to fuss with it, let's redo it, shall we? I'm just going to grab all of those and hit delete from inside of the piano roll. I'm going to make sure that we're completely stopped at the beginning. For some reason, it stopped like at it started at like bar 4 or something. So we're going to make sure we get it from the very beginning. I'll hit record. Alright, let's go ahead and, whoops, come on, cool. See if we can't see this sound into the mix a little more. I'm going to pull some more of those low frequencies off of it, bring the high pass cutoff up to about 906 hertz there. We're going to bring this down in the mix quite a bit more to give those other percussion sounds enough space to breathe in the mix as well. There. I think, go ahead and save again. And I think what we'll do is just check the frequencies on that new shaker. We're going to click the audio effects down here in the bottom left. And we're going to make sure that we're on just that one sound. So up at the top here, I'm going to click the pads. We're going to choose select pad. Then I can just use Quasar Shaker Quasar. We can pick the Quasar Shaker 01. We can load an audio unit onto that. And we can go down here to FabFilter Pro Q3 again and show that plugin. And we can just play the groove and get a visual representation of what our hi-hat, what our shaker frequency is doing. Now, right off the jump here, what we can see is we've got, pretty serious peak right there at about 11 kilohertz, which I'll tame a little bit. And we've also got this strange peak up, at the top here at 22 kilohertz, which we definitely don't want. And this is one of the reasons why I love the FabFilter Pro Q3, is because you can see the frequencies so that you can get a visual representation of what you're hearing. Bring that low pass up here. Let's just adjust these. Let's bring this little peak down a little bit, tame that peak a little bit. Fantastic. That's so much better. What I want to do now is just get rid of this peak up here at 21 kilohertz. Instead of just pulling it down, what we're going to actually do is change our high cut up here from a 30 decibels per octave to a 96 decibels per octave and make it a really steep curve. Just bring that down the tiniest little bit. And now we can see that that little peak off the top is actually gone. Can you see that? And that just really helps the mix be where it needs to be. And you really want that kind of thing so that you don't put fatigue on your listeners' ears. If you have a buildup of like high frequency content for no reason, sure, it might sound great, coming through the phone, it really jumps out of the phone. But when people are listening to that content on like big speakers or on like headphones, they're definitely going to get ear fatigue if you're not taking care to adjust those frequencies. And making, if they're not there, if you don't need to, and your samples don't have that extra high frequency content, then that's fine and you won't need to worry about it. But I love being able to use the FabFilter Pro Q3 so that we can see the frequencies that we're not necessarily hearing. Okay. I'm going to make sure that we're saved here, and I'm just going to check in with the chat real fast. Lots of B&3 love in this stream. Good deal. I really think that this is an amazing DAW, you guys. I think this is a powerful app. I know a lot of people, sort of have their issues with it. They like to, have a very, very specific workflow and don't want to deviate from that at all. But if you can kind of get your head around what you can do inside of Beatmaker 3 and not these strange limitations that I keep hearing from people who are trying to do workflows that just are maybe a little bit extremely robust, let's put it that way. If you can just tame it and bring it back a little bit, record stuff to audio and use it, in this way as an audio sampling tool with minimal extra, synthesizers and tools that it has to load every single time it loads the session. You can see here we haven't had any crashes today. We haven't had any anomalies. It works pretty darn well if you use it the way that it's intended to be used, Speaking of anomalies and all that, let's just go ahead and save at this time, and we'll go ahead and just close the app out. I like to do this when I've put in, an hour or so on a project and make sure that there's not going to be any anomalies when we go to load that project again. If there are, we'll discover them now, earlier on in the project, rather than, say later when we've done hours and hours of more work. I'm going to go ahead and load that up. And there's no anomalies. Everything's loaded just fine, just like we would expect. Fantastic. All right. Let's see here. What we'll do, actually, is go ahead and just pick another empty pad. Go to the second page. Go to the recording. And reselect the audio input there so it knows our audio interface. If I hit monitor, now hear what I'm playing here. Maybe we can just keep scrolling. Oh. Oh. Well, this is crazy. These are fun old vocal samples, on this patch. What else we got here?
Boom, 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 dash, dash,
Ooh.
dash, 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 boom, 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 boom.
Ooh. Oh, that is really old school, you guys. But it sort of has a rhythm to it. Yeah. It almost fits right with the beat, right? Come on, that's too classic. We have got to sample that in for sure. Okay. All right. That is a fantastic find. All right. You guys know I love that old school 90s sounding samples. This is where I, started in the 90s working with stuff in this exact same way, just sampling things. I started out with an Akai S2800 sampler, was sort of like my big deal sampler back in the 90s. I started out in like 1987 working with a Roland S50 sampler. It's like pretty much the oldest like commercially available consumer grade sampler or whatever. It sampled in 8-bit mono format. Oh my gosh, it was painful. And in the 90s, I moved up to an Akai S2800, which had a lot more, features, like a built-in filter and cool stuff like that. And this is really just how I love to work, recording sounds. I'm just trying to get to the edit page here. Here we go, trim, and let's go ahead and zoom in on this sound. One of the reasons that I like to do this, and I've been doing this kind of stuff for years, guys, and I don't know if you've ever, made a session inside of Beatmaker 3 or, any DAW for that matter, and then you've maybe gone back a few months later or whatnot and like tried to load that session up and it doesn't load for whatever reason. A lot of the reasons like that I've had or run into those type of problems over the years with computers is due to plugins not loading or maybe not being compatible anymore. And if you've got a project that has say 50 synthesizers and 50 plugins that need to load, if there's an error in maybe even one of those plugins or even one of those synthesizers, or maybe you no longer have that synthesizer, maybe it's been discontinued, maybe Windows went from 32-bit to 64-bit and everything that was 32-bit is now gone and won't load, etc., etc., etc. The longer you've been doing this music production, the more of those kind of anomalies you might run into. And so by squeezing everything to audio workflow as much as possible, it eliminates those things that the DAWs and apps will have to load, and the chances of that same project being able to load, even 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I mean, when you're putting out, commercial music, there's a good chance that for whatever reason, or if you're licensing music even more, to film or television or video games, that somebody may come back to you for a piece of music that you've written, say 5, 6 years ago, and they may ask for a change, or they may ask you to to make it longer, to make it shorter. And if you can't load that session, then you can't make those changes. And when you've experienced that sort of thing, when you just literally can't load up a session and you can't make any adjustments to it, that's very, very, very frustrating. And you tend to start shaping your workflow in ways that doesn't happen. And that's definitely one of the reasons why I'm really big about just using a sample-based workflow inside of an app like Beatmaker 3. Apps on the iPad disappear all the time. Developers stop developing. Maybe they don't pay their app store dues anymore. That app is gone. And if you're trying to load a project with an app that's gone, or maybe an app that has a bug but the developer hasn't fixed, now the project doesn't load anymore. The more of those variables you leave in your projects, the more chance that they might not, load up again 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road. Just something to keep in mind. All right. So let's see here. So that's why we're being super, super careful and labeling everything accordingly and saving everything into the directories where Beatmaker 3 knows where the samples are, and that way it's always going to be able to load these sessions. The only plugins that I'm using in this session right now are the FabFilter Pro Q3. That's definitely not going to go anywhere. And I'm also using a plugin on the master, the Amazing Noises Limiter plugin. And I'm hoping that plugin is not going to go anywhere. Okay, we need to go ahead and actually rename this sample and save it. I have this issue in that window where I need to close the left-hand side. It kind of thwarts me sometimes there. We're going to go into the main sample directory, and we're going to call this Quasar Vocal Stab on 01, right? Okay, cool. Now we just need to go back to that directory and re-drag it onto the pad that we want it to be on. So let's see here. Samples, Quasar Vocal Stab 01. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and do that high pass filter trick on this one again, making sure there's no any sort of low frequencies hanging out in that sound that we can't hear. Maybe give it a tiny little bit of panning to the left, like just a 6 to get it off of that dead center spot. Maybe bring the gain down a tiny little bit by default, and maybe give it a little bit of reverb by default. Okay, it's this one here. Oh, fantastic. Let's put that in, shall we? One more time. Didn't seem to want to put that in. Let's see what I did wrong here. Quasar Vocal Stab. I see. What happened is it actually put it at the end, and this is a great anomaly. I'm so glad that it did this so that I can show you guys and that we can fix it. Okay, so we just tried to record the vocal sample in, right? I started in the middle of the bar, in the middle of the 8 bars, just kind of arbitrarily. Here's the vocal stab being put in on the downbeat of measure 5 right here. And then if we look over here, we can see that it actually put the stab on the downbeat of measure 9 rather than on the beginning of the loop where it's supposed to go. This is easily fixable. We can just, sort of highlight that, just drag this over till we get it on the very beginning. And now what's happening, if we look closely, we're going to see that it's actually thinking this is a 9-bar pattern now, but it's not. It's an 8-bar pattern. So I want to drag this loop brace back over to the end there, okay? Now, if we go back to song mode, I can just make sure that we're not hanging over the end like we were a moment ago. In fact, if I go to that pattern here in our pattern list and click the 3 dots next to it, we'll see that it does in fact think it's a 9-bar pattern. So I want to make that an 8-bar pattern. I don't want to leave that weird little anomaly just sort of hanging out there for no reason. So we're going to fix that right off the jump. All right, so now we've got that taken care of. We're going to hit save again. And I'm just going to play this groove while I check in with the chat real fast. Yeah, I definitely miss Matthew being on the development team, Samuel, for sure. For sure. Hey, Oceans in Space. Hey, Martin. Yeah, we can definitely do that, Martin. No problem. Is the Roland W30, is that a workstation, Samuel? I'm not familiar with that number. It looks, I mean, I should be, but I'm just not. I did check out that concert, Russ, as a matter of fact. Jean-Michel Jarre, 3D, like was a, I want to say New Year's Eve now. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but I did check it out. And it was really interesting. I was sort of confused as to whether, like, the virtual punters in the audience there were supposed to be like people at home on their VR, or whether that was just part of the visualizations of it all. I don't know if that makes any sense. I think I'm a little bit old to understand some of the technology. Check it out. Prodigy. Roland W30. Well, thank you very much, Samuel. I will definitely... Oh, Prodigy used it. Yeah, right on. Roland W30. All right. Good deal. I appreciate the tip. Let's see here. Let's see if we can add something else today. Let's go ahead and make sure we're saved. And if I click a pad here, we can go to the second page and click the little recording tab and click the monitoring so we can hear what we're doing. And now whatever I play, we're hearing that back. So let's go ahead and hit play and just scroll for some more sounds. Ooh. We got that 808 cowbell. I know some people have been waiting on that. Let's see here. I think we're going to check out some melodic sounds here. And maybe what we'll do is, let's see. We've got this particular Quasar is a really bonus Quasar. It has both of the expansion cards in this that were available. There's a TRE card. I'm not exactly sure what that stands for. And there was a hardcore expansion as well. And let's see here. I believe we can get to those sounds like a so. Yes, we can. So this is the D bank, right? And then cool. All right. So we can check. These are the sounds that are either in the hardcore expansion or the TRE expansion. I think it's the hardcore. I'm not exactly sure. But to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter because these are like sounds from 1994. So when I say like hardcore sounds, it's not going to be the type of sounds we might associate with hardcore of today, 30 years later. So these are basically just fun, older sounds that we're scrolling through. And let's see what we can get here. I'm going to go ahead and just play the groove, I think. Are we getting too loud there at home? Is everything okay with the level still? Can you hear me? And can you hear the level of the music okay? Is anything distorted or too loud? Just let me know if that's the case, and I can try to make an adjustment. It's all, you guys know I love the dub, so it's kind of always a go-to for me to be like, hey, we could just put a dubby chord stab over this, But I don't think we're going to stop at that sound. Let's keep scrolling a bit today. I think we're gonna dub it out. I think we're gonna dub it out. Unless there's a, you know, a big aversion to the dub, then I think we're gonna dub it out. If you don't want me to dub it out, you let me know in the chat and I'll try to do something else, okay? But if you're cool with that, we're gonna dub it out. I'm gonna go ahead and record this. Alright, here we go. I'm gonna try to get a double hit in one recording. Okay. There it is. Let that kind of play out there. And I'm gonna check the chat to see if there's any aversion to the dub. Okay, let's see here. Did we get it? I do believe we did. Is it this one here? If I go to edit, get this weird page out again. Yeah, okay, let's trim that, and let's zoom in just a little bit on that start point and try to trim some of that air off the very beginning of the sound, because I did a little bit of a rhythmic thing here where I held the chord and then kind of sort of popped that last note there. Hopefully that'll be in rhythm here, and we'll go ahead and normalize this to maybe, oh, I don't know, -5, get quite a bit more volume on that there, right? Awesome. Okay, so we can hear that it kind of cuts off right about here. I'm going to go ahead and trim, and then I'm going to highlight just the very end section of the sample, and I'm going to do a process and a fade out. We're going to go ahead and bring the start point back to the very beginning, and we're just going to need to save this now like we've been doing. So we're going to go to the save it in the main sample directory. We're going to call this Quasar. This is a C minor chord stab 01. Cool deal. All right. Now we just need to grab that pad and drag it, that sample rather, and drag it onto the pad that we'd like it to be on. So if we go to our main samples directory, we can, let's see here, C minor chord stab 01. Fantastic. Let's just grab that and stick it up there at the top. If we go to the second page, we can change the color to match the silly little color palette that I've got working today. All right, cool. And maybe we'll go ahead and pan the chord just a little bit to the right by default to get it off of that, you know, center. We'll pan it maybe like 8% to the right. These are really subtle amounts here. Let's turn that high pass filter on again and just filter out anything beneath about maybe 150 hertz. So there's no like super lows accidentally hanging out in the sound. And let's just give it a little bit of reverb to begin with. C minor, cool. How does that sound? Maybe some more reverb by default because this is dub, and let's dub it out, right? Okay, let's go ahead and save. And I'm just going to play the groove and see what happens here. I think I wanted to put this on the downbeat based on the rhythm that I played in. Cool, I'm going to hit record. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, and 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, and 8, 2, 3, 4. Let's bring a little bit more. Actually, let's EQ this using the FabFilter Pro Q3 rather. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to go to the Audio Effects tab and turn the music off so I'm not yelling quite as much there. We're going to choose just that pad. So I'm going to choose Bank 1 and choose Select Pad. Then we just need to find, you know, that sample, Quasar C minor chord stab 01. Now I'm just affecting that pad only. So we can go ahead and use an audio unit V3. We can scroll down and we can put the Pro Q3 on just that one sound. We can open up the plugin here, and if I play it now, we can see that sound coming through here. I'm going to load up my default setting and bring that up here to where the low frequency content of that sound is actually happening. And this way, what I'm doing here is I'm got this rolled up to 98 hertz, and based on, the visual of the sound, I can see that there's not really any low end here, so I can do this freely without really worrying about messing anything up, right? Just kind of match the low frequency spectrum of the sound itself. Now, if I sort of, hold this down, we get our visual as to what those frequencies are actually doing, right? And we'll see here that it's really tame and really even, and there aren't any like extreme resonant peaks. We can also see that the majority of the frequency content here is happening between about 3.7 kilohertz and about 200 kilohertz. So we're really in sort of the low mids section of the EQ is where this particular sound is kind of resting. I'd like to maybe fill in a little bit more frequency content in the higher spectrum here. Let's give a listen. Just going to put in a high shelf EQ filter here and bring this up a couple of decibels, maybe 1 or 2. Oops, come on. There we go. A 2 decibel boost here is bringing up all of the frequencies that are in this sort of range here now by about 2 decibels, giving us a tiny little bit more push on the high frequency content of this sound. I think that sounds pretty good. I think maybe we need to maybe bring it down in the mix a tiny bit. Bring it back up a half a decibel. How's that sounding? Hey, thanks very much, Steven. Hey, you're very welcome. Yeah, if we could offset, that was an interesting comment there. If we had an offset that went into the negative, that we could use the AU sample delay, that would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and save again. And let's see here. We've got quite a bit of sounds baked into this groove. Maybe we could try to get like one more sound in here and then try to make some variations of the groove that we built. Let's see, how long have we been streaming for? About an hour and 45 minutes. Ooh, a little longer than I realized. All right, thanks for sticking around, everyone. I really appreciate your support. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat, whether they be, Beatmaker 3 related, whether they be MIDI controller related, or music production related in general, and I'll do my best to answer those. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and pick another open pad, shall we? Go to the recording screen, hit recording. We're still selected on our audio interface, and if I hit monitor, now whatever I'm playing in, we can hear. So let's go ahead and just play the groove and start scrolling through some more sounds and see if anything sounds good. Good, right? Let's try to get that. Ooh, I think I got it with that second one there. Let's find out. So let's see, if I switch back over here, we can see that that particular sound is got an interesting thing happening in the stereo field, where the right channel is a whole bunch different than the left channel. That could be either a neat thing, or it could be a detriment to the sound, depending on what we want it to actually sound like. Let's get in here and edit this, shall we? See if I can't get this to close. Hey, all right. And trim. And let's zoom in just a little bit on the very beginning of this sound so that we can cut off that air at the beginning. That looks pretty good. Let's trim that there. And I wish I would have left that ringing out a little more, but I didn't, so that's fine. Let's just choose an arbitrary place where we can do a little bit of a fade out there and see if that sounds okay. If it doesn't, we can just resample it. Whoop. Is there a click at the end? There's a little click at the end of some kind. Let's see if we can't get that out of there. I'm going to highlight the end, and we're going to process and fade out. If it's still got that click, we're going to resample it. It's still got that click. I'm really confused because I believe we're at the very end there. Okay, let's try this. Let's do that. I'm going to trim off the end and then select the end and go fade out. We're going to listen again for that tiny click at the end. It's not there now. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and process this and normalize it to, oh, I don't know, like -5. Get the volume a little bit louder. I like that we have such an interesting stereo field happening in this sound as well. I mean, you can see here that there's definitely, you know, different sonic material happening on the right channel than on the left channel. This is one of the things that's really awesome. You know, I use mono samples a lot when I'm using the Digitact or the Polyan Tracker, and you just don't, you know, get to have this lovely stereo separation on your sounds. Everything gets a little bit more sort of flat sounding. Let's go ahead and save this so we can re-drag it in. We're going to save it to our main sample directory, and we're going to call this Quasar. This is another C minor stab, let's say 02 or something, right? We just need to drag it onto the pad that we want it to be on. So let's go ahead and do that at this time. C minor stab 02. Cool, and now we can go ahead and bring open these colors and put that on the right one and save. Cool deal. Let's play the groove here. Actually, let's put a high pass filter on this. You guys can see these techniques are a lot the same for a lot of these sounds, you know. We're going to put the high pass filter by default up to about 100 kilohertz and remove any of those, you know, sub frequencies that could be hanging out down there. I also want this sound to be a little bit more even in the mix and not super heavy weighted to the right channel. So what we're going to do is by default, let's pan this like 15 to the left and see what happens. So we get more of this content happening on the left side than without the panning. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, bring off, actually, let's not bring off the lows here, but let's save. And then let's put the FabFilter Pro Q3 on that again. This is one of the reasons why I'm really enjoying using this iPad Pro. I think this is like a 2019 iPad Pro. It's a lot more CPU powerful than the iPad Air 2s that I was originally using. Those would allow me to maybe load, you know, 2 or 3 at the most instances of something like the Pro Q3 in a project, whereas the iPad Pro is allowing me to add, you know, quite a few of those. So we want to add that on the second chord stab. We're going to go add audio effect and audio units V3, and we're going to scroll down and we're going to get to the Pro Q3. We're going to go load, and then we'll get that on the screen here so we can take a look at the frequencies that are coming through on the sound. Let's go ahead and record this in. 1, 2, 3, and... Oops, I hit the wrong pad. That probably came through in the recording, too. I could probably just undo that, actually. Yes, there it went. All right, fantastic. Let's try that again. Right. Nice. Let's go ahead and take a look here. If we, let's see, how do I get that off? I have trouble getting back to this little screen sometimes. But what I want to do is take a listen to our pads. And make sure that they're alternating in their panning so that the first pad is coming out of, a little bit more on one side, and the next pad will be coming out a little bit more on the other side. Now, I had originally panned this sound to the right, and this one we're panning to the left a little bit. Let's just make these a little bit more extreme with the panning settings. Let's go 15 on this one. How are we doing with the way this sounds? Maybe we need to bring that new one down a little bit still. Now we can check out the EQ on that one. Yeah, cool. Let's take off those lows. You guys see this, how we're kind of, there's not any super resonant, peaks that are, sticking through, and that looks pretty good. We're sort of casually rounding off this top section, and then we have this tiny little boost up here around 20K. I would rather that be a little bit smoother, and let's see if we can make that happen. I'm gonna go ahead and just play the groove here. What I'm gonna do is make this a 6 decibels per octave slope. And we're just going to pull down on the frequency range here a little bit. Nice. That's allowing us to sort of tame that high frequency spike there just a little bit. I think what we're going to do is pull a little bit more low frequency content out of this one so that it starts to be more of a call and response rather than just a call. I don't know if I said that very well, but basically we just want to give the other sounds enough room in the mix to breathe, and this is going to be really, really, really subtle. I'm going to take down like 1 decibel at about 400 hertz so that, our low mids just have that tiny little bit more room for other instruments to exist over this chord stab. Need some lately bass. I totally agree, Samuel. I totally agree. Save this. And, what I've got today is we're sampling out of this Quasimidi Quasar, and I'm just using the performance settings, which are like programs that are made up of more than one sound in here. So we don't really have a way in the performances to scroll through sound choices. For instance, I can't set it on basses and then just start scrolling, but we can do that if I go to the general MIDI section. So maybe we can try that out, and then I can change these sound groups here. We've got a group for general MIDI pianos. Let's see if I can get some of these sounds to actually come through so we can hear them, right? Yeah, so we're gonna have really old school house pianos. And let's see if I can find a bass sound group. Here we go. Let me go down a few octaves here. Not a lot of options there, but about 6 options only in the general MIDI bass? Come on now, really? Let's see what happens if we play this groove and maybe something will maybe jump out at us. Let's see what happens. Hey, get your mind right, crew. All right, thanks for signing in. It's good to see ya. I'm not exactly sure where I would find that, Samuel. I'm in the sound group here for, basses, and it just has those very few, unfortunately. Let's see here. We got percussion, sound effects, voices, drums, drum sets, best of, accordion, organ, pipes, orchestra, ensemble, synth piano, solo brass, brasses, synth brass, guitars, chromatic, top 40, synth effects, pianos, basses. Ooh. cool. Let's see what we can find here. We got an acid bass. Got an acid bass again. Acoustic bass. Got Juno bass. That's almost a lately bass. Not quite though. It's a little too distorted, kind of, I think, for the vibe I'm going for. Not quite right either. Actually, what we can do is I don't know why I didn't think of this already. I've got the Novation SL-MK3 MIDI controller. It's also a sequencer, and I've got it MIDI'd up to this system right now. So when I press play inside of Beatmaker 3, it starts the clock on the SL-MK3 over here. So what I should be able to do is just like kind of tap in some sort of a rhythm, and we should be able to scroll through the bass sounds on the Quasar, hearing that actual rhythm. Just a really simple kind of techno bass part here. And sure enough, now I can scroll through some of these sounds. Although I probably put it in an octave too low. Yeah, I put it in an octave too low. Let's fix that. Cool. Just something for us to kind of hear while we're scrolling. Actually, this one isn't bad. Hold on. It's kind of just like a nice offbeat trance bass. I think maybe we'll grab that. Maybe that second one. Yeah. Whoops. Edit. Cool. Let's go in here and grab that last one, shall we? Trim that out. Trim. Trim. Let's make this a little bit louder. Normalize to maybe, oh, I don't know, negative. There we go. Cool. And get right in on the beginning here so we can trim out right up on the beginning of that sound. Maybe just the tiniest little bit more in still. Yeah. Cool. Better. Trim. All right. And then maybe grab this ending section here of air and just do a quick fade out there. All right, and go ahead and save this in our main sample directory. This is a C, actually we'll call this Quasar C bass hit 01 or something. Cool. Now all we need to do is just drag that from that directory onto the pad we want it to be on. So let's see here, Quasar C bass hit 01. Let's put that down here. Let's go to the second page and do this little color scheme that I've been working on as well and save that. Cool. Okay, let's see if we can get this in the mix. Bring the gain down a little bit. Maybe put a low pass filter on this guy to take out some of the really high frequency content. I feel like this is out of tune a little. Let me take a look here at my, I've got a little reference screen open in the background. See if I can get that up. Bringing some of the high frequency content off of that bass using this low pass filter here. Careful not to push that resonance up too far. Let's see if we can't just tap in a simple little bass line, shall we? 2, 3, and... Bring the volume on this down just a little bit. Take off that metronome. Cool. Absolutely, Steven. This is the Novation SL MK3, and it's also it's a MIDI controller, but it's also an 8-track standalone hardware sequencer that works without needing to use the computer, or if you're into using Ableton, it also syncs up really well with Ableton as well. You've got all these different faders and knobs. You've got 8 different faders. You've got 16 buttons at the top, 16 knobs over here, and you've got 16 pads over here, which you can do complete custom assignments for your different instruments. So then you can use 8 different tracks to control 8 different hardware instruments in real time. It's a pretty expensive MIDI controller, but that's because it's also a sequencer. The Novation SL MK3. Cool. That bass is maybe a little loud still. What let's do is let's go ahead and put an EQ on this bass so we can see what it's actually doing in the frequency, excuse me, in the frequency spectrum of our mix. And what let's do is we'll go to Audio Effects. We're going to choose just that pad there. C, bass hit, come on now. This is that one that didn't get... Oh, there it is. Okay, cool deal. Let's go ahead and add an audio effect onto just that one there. We'll scroll down, and we can choose that Pro Q3 again. Now, if we play the track, we can see the bass frequencies coming through here. All right. Whoops. Removing some of the really low sub-frequency content from this bass sound. And I think I'm going to do the tiniest little bit of taming on the mid-frequency content as well. Just a tiny little bit in the mids here. Yeah. And what I really want is I really want this bass to be subtle. So I'm going to bring it back in the mix a little more. Alright. And lastly, we're going to save here. I've got a neat sidechain compression thing happening with our rhythm effect and the kick drum. Let me see if I can show you what I mean here. If I mute all of the tracks except for those 2 tracks, the kick drum is doing a pumping effect here on this rhythm so that the kick doesn't have to fight with the frequency content of the rhythm. Every time the kick drum hits, it ducks the volume of this sort of rhythm groove a little bit. And I want to sort of involve this bass here in that same sort of concept. So on the bass here, we've got just the bass selected here. I want to make sure that, you know, when the kick drum hits, it sort of ducks any sort of bass that may be coming out of this pad here. So we're going to go ahead and add the dynamics processor at this time. I'm going to actually, I think we're going to select this pad first, which is the Weird Tech Thing pad, and I've got the sidechain on that set up exactly the way that I would want it set up to receive kick drum as the input and to do quite a bit of extreme pumping. So rather than try to redo these settings, we're going to go ahead and save this as a, let's call this tester or something like that, right? So that what we can do is we can get the exact same settings on the bass. Let's go ahead and select the bass pad up here, bass C hit. Okay, good deal. And we've got our compressor, we've got our dynamics compressor here. If I choose a preset, I can choose that tester preset. And now we can actually see right here that the sidechain is ducking quite a bit every time that that kick hits. And it's just kind of helping the rhythm of this groove lock a little bit more and helping the kick drum be the loudest and most forefront thing in the mix. Looks like we have an empty pad here that I sampled onto but didn't actually delete the recording that we didn't use there. That's where I originally put the bass. I see, okay. So we've got an empty pad there basically. Just delete this for now. Cool. And save. Just gonna check the chat and make sure I'm not missing any questions here. Hey, thanks very much, Connor. All right. Bring that bass down again, I think still. I don't want the bass to sort of conflict with the kick drum, and I don't want it to sort of conflict with the chords that we have either. I'm going to see if I can turn this one and show you guys what I'm working with over here. In the distance behind me, I've got Ableton open, and I've also got the YouTube chat window open over here, and I've got OBS open over here. But what it's allowing me to do with these visualizers over here inside of Ableton, you know, is to get a really good look at what the frequencies are actually doing in the mix. This plugin on the bottom left here is the Isotope Tonal Balance Control. And it's set to its sort of frequency references for what they're considering to be bass-heavy music. And so when I play the groove, we sort of want our line to fill in, you know, in the middle, preferably, of those frequencies. And if we can get our groove to line up in the middle there, then we know our groove is going to sound all that much better. Let's take a really good look there at what that looks like when I play this, shall we? Everything is looking pretty much okay, but you can see that there's a little bit of a dip in these kind of frequencies right over here between about 2,000 and 6,000 hertz, or kilohertz rather. And there's a couple of things that we can do to sort of address that and sort of, you know, make it sound a little bit better per se. I'm going to go ahead and See if I can't get the camera back to where I had it here. All right. And let's see if we can address that sort of a frequency issue, shall we? If I play the mix here, what we can do is maybe we can start on our main chord stab. Maybe we can open up this plugin here. That's the bass hit. I don't want that one, but rather we want, yeah. I'm going to try to get it a little more of that high frequency content still. We're also going to take out a tiny little bit more low frequency content from this with a low shelf filter. I'm talking really subtle adjustments here. This is like 1 decibel off of the low frequency content. Just tiny little adjustments here. Save. Let's grab our next chord stab, shall we? Yeah, alright. What I'm going to do, I think, is change this one. Yeah. Just trying to add a tiny little bit more higher frequency content to our chords here. Basically, really what we need is like a 1 to 2 decibel boost, a really gentle boost in about the 3000 kilohertz range. What let's do is let's bring up our main out here, and I have a Pro Q3 on that as well, so that we can get a really good visualization as to what's happening on our master bus. This is all of the tracks in the mix now running through this one EQ. Yeah, and if we look really closely, we can kind of see that there's a little bit of a dip in the frequency content here. And you know, it would probably be the most beneficial thing if I went into, you know, the tracks individually and made a little bit of adjustments on that frequency range. But I can also just kind of grab this at 3000 kilohertz rather, and just do a tiny little, you know, 1 decibel boost there. So I'm just doing a really, really gentle boost in that frequency spectrum on the master bus here, so that all of the tracks, every single sample is now running through that a little bit and giving us that tiny little bit more frequency content in that part of the spectrum. Alright, so we've been going for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. What I'd like to do is maybe create a couple of variations of this. And what we can do is we can click on the upper left here to get to our pattern selector. We can maybe just click the 3 dots on that first pattern there and duplicate that maybe, you know, another time. We can maybe rename this first one here and call this, let's call this like full groove, shall we? Let's call this full groove 01. I mean, why not? 01, cool. And then here on pattern 2, we can maybe rename this, and maybe we can call this minimal variation 01, right? And so if we have our minimal variation 01 playing, right? If we sort of make sure that that's the one that's actually playing in the song window. Full groove 01. Okay, let's delete that, remove, and put in minimal variation 01 instead. And what let's do is just double click in here and let's remove some of these things so that it's not the full groove just banging away, right? There we go. of our tracks. Fantastic. So maybe what we want to do for this variation here is maybe we want to like get rid of the claps and stuff. So let's go ahead and highlight these claps, shall we? And go delete. Use 2 fingers and we can move the screen there and delete these claps, right? Let's go ahead and delete some of these extra open hats and stuff like that. So it's a more minimal groove variation, right? Alright. Let's go ahead and delete our second chord stab. Yeah. Okay, you guys remember that we assigned the kick drum volume to a macro at the beginning? And that's still there and still able to, you know, help us with those turnarounds and whatnot. 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. Drop the kick. 8, 2. Bring it back now. So we're already starting to groove and jam a little bit, right? One of the things maybe we could do with this more minimal variation would be to remove that vocal stab. Delete. Delete. We're just trying to get this a lot more minimal here. Maybe we'll go ahead and delete the shaker from this section as well. Delete that shaker. Alright. Yeah. Maybe delete the chords actually as well. Just have bass and some rhythm happening. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, alright. So let's use this as sort of like an intro type of pattern, shall we? If we go to, you know, where it says playing song here, we can get to our patterns. And instead of calling this minimal variation 01, we could just rename this. Maybe we call this intro 01, right? Cool deal. And let's see, if we go back into the song menu. All right, we've got intro 01. Then I can grab full groove 01 and I can duplicate, come on now, I can grab full groove 01 and I can duplicate that again. We can rename this to maybe, let's say, more percussion, right? So we've got an intro now. Then we've got one that says more percussion. I'll just grab that and put that right next to the other groove. We're going to use the loop braces here to go ahead and loop just bars 9 through 17. So now I'm working on just that particular pattern. Now you see how the pattern is, oops, I'm on the wrong screen there. You see how the pattern is sort of grayed out here? If we just press the little play icon up here, it lets it know that we're working in the in the arrangement view, excuse me. So we can sort of get back to the view there. We can double click on this pattern and we can, whoops, I always have a little bit of difficulty getting back to this sort of view sometimes, where you got the sample names on the left and the information on the right. Sometimes I have to get a little screwy with the clicking. Let's go ahead and delete just a couple of things from this one, so it'll be almost the full pattern but not the full pattern, so that we'll still have the full pattern to go into after this one. I'm going to play the groove. Let's go ahead and start by taking off the second chord stab. So we'll only leave in the first chord stab here. Cool. Now, I also want to stress that sometimes, you know, looking at this type of a view where there's like just a whole bunch of MIDI notes, you know, where we're looking at one bank and all of the MIDI notes in that one bank, it can be a little intimidating to just, you know, look at all these notes this way. But I just really want to stress that once you get used to working like this and doing the zoom, and, you know, it's really not that difficult. You can see the names of all the samples here, and you can highlight or add notes, you know, as you need to. It does take some time. Let's go go ahead and take the shaker out of this one so that we still have the shaker to bring in a lot more extra rhythm on the next pattern. Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. So now what we've got is if I click back over to song here, and we pinch in a little bit and go back to our patterns, and I can take full groove and I can drop the full groove over here, and maybe we can even duplicate that so that it plays twice. So now we've got 4 8-bar patterns, and I've got this loop. We'll press that play button up here again so that we get the patterns highlighted. And this is why I like to name stuff as well, so we can see that we're starting with the intro, then we go into the more percussion version, and then we go into 2 bars of our full groove. So let me go ahead and play this from the beginning now, and let's see kind of what it sounds like as we I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, as we transgress through these patterns. Cool. I think what I'm going to do right off the jump is go back into this intro pattern and get rid of this crash so that it's not quite so, jarring right as the track starts here, per se. And I might, take the time to create some sort of an actual, intro using some of the melodic elements, stuff like that. But for now, let's just start with the beat just starting, Hey, good to see you back, Wall. We're still going. This is a long one. It's been like 2 hours and 20 minutes now. But I think we're creating a pretty decent groove. Yeah, that's sounding pretty good. We're going to go back to the beginning. And at this point, we could, keep adding variations and bringing in more sounds and searching for more sounds, bringing different elements of this groove in and out every 8 bars. Here we go. It really doesn't have to be complex or intimidating, I don't think, Samuel. This is a really, really easy way to work with the app. I think some people think it's a little strange, that we're not, having a track for the bass and having an individual track for the drums and having an individual track for the effects and all that. But once you get used to working with the one-bank workflow, I really don't find myself missing having those extra tracks. If I want to EQ something, I can EQ something. If I want to send something to an effect or put an effect on just one pad, that's not a problem. And by doing it this way, we always have access to everything that we have assigned to the macros. In fact, let's go ahead and take this moment to assign a few more things to the macros, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and save. And let's do like a thing to where when we roll one of these knobs, some of the tunings on these sounds could change, right? So let's see here. Let's start with these claps. Let's start with the clap number 1 and open this up. It's currently set on the tuning to 0, so we'll just remember that there's no tuning on these sounds. We're going to double click this, the tuning, and we're going to click on macro controls. Here we can see that I've already got this macro assigned to macro 8 for the kick volume. That's how I'm bringing the kick drum in and out with the knob. Let's assign this clap tuning to macro 1. By default, when you assign a macro to a knob, it's going to run the full width of the range of movement of that knob, but we don't want that. We're going to go into the macros tab here, and the very first one says tuning now. We're going to go ahead and open this up, and let's see, we'll rename where it says tuning to, let's call this we're going to assign a bunch of stuff here and really get into what a macro is all about, which is about assigning multiple things to happen when we move one knob. Let's call this repitcher, okay? And let's make it so at its minimum state, when the knob is at its 0 position, in this case, the 0 position is all the way down. Let's make it so there's no tuning adjustment. Excuse me, but let's make it so that when we do turn the knob, that it does shift the pitch on this, let's say down 5 semitones. And let's do that exact same thing with the second clap, so that both claps have this sort of an assignment built into them. Choose that second clap there, double click on tuning and assign that to macro, click on macro 1. And this is a really important thing that I want to make sure you understand, that we can assign as many different things to happen when we move one knob as we so decide here. So if I click on these 3 dots to get the window open, now we can see that we have 2 things assigned to this knob. So on the second clap, I want those same settings. I don't want anything to happen when the knob is in its 0 position. But when I move the knob, let's have it scroll this sound down 5 semitones. So both claps are going to down pitch by -5 semitones when I roll the knob. And let's see what that sounds like, shall we? Or not. Like I've lost my controller routing here, so let's see if we can't figure that out. Why? On the macro controls, macro 1, I want it here. It's not responding anymore. Okay, we're going to go ahead and unplug the controller. We're going to replug the controller back in and see if I can't get reconnected here. Launch control. Okay, looks like we're connected again. I'm not sure what that was about. Let's try that out. Yeah. Okay. Still got the kick, right? I can remove that kick. Cool. 2, 3, 4. Whoops. What happened there? Did we lose connection again already? What is happening? All right. Macro control 1. Are you... Yeah, it's just not wanting to keep the connection all of a sudden. Well, that's weird and certainly not good. Let's try one more time, shall we? I don't want to spend a bunch of time teching stuff out today, but if we can get it to work, that'd be awesome, because it usually does just fine. Cool. Okay, and there's our kick, right? So, just gonna... Yeah, here we go. Here's our claps playing now. So if I roll this knob... That's very subtle, but very cool. Listen close. We're changing the pitch on the clap. So up here, it's a little tighter. I think we can make this maybe a little bit more evident if we go back into these settings and we make the minimum at +1 semitone on both of these claps, and the maximum when we roll the knob to go down to maybe -7 semitones. What does that sound like? Let's go back to that section in the menu where we can hear the clap, and cool. So here's the clap not being affected, and as I start rolling the pitch down, hey, what's happening, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Do you hear how we're changing the pitch now on this clap? We can make this a little bit more evident and dramatic as well. I'm going to click the save button there. And what we're going to do is maybe give another sound, some pitch movement as well. Let's choose this open hi-hat here, shall we? By default, we have that set to a +2 tuning. If I click this and choose macro and put it on macro 1, which is our repitcher macro, now I've got 3 items here. And I believe we said that that was by default at +2. And I can have that roll down to whatever I'd like it to roll down to. Let's have it roll down to -10, so that when I roll this knob, our claps will detune by 7 semitones, and our open hi-hat will actually go down a full octave. Let's see what that sounds like. Go back over to where we can hear the clap. You hear that open hi-hat is now repitching as well. Okay, so I'll leave it here so you can hear it. Listen now. That hi-hat actually gets quite a bit louder when we tune the pitch down. So let's get in here and tweak that as well. The volume on that open hi-hat by default is set to -4. But if I double click it and assign that to that repitcher, that same macro, right? We open that up and I have now the gain settings on this. Well, I just said it was by default at -4. So we set its position in the minimum position to, you guessed it, -4. So when the knob is all the way down, it's not affecting the volume of the sound at all. And when I roll the knob, it's not only going to detune that hi-hat, but now it's also going to bring the volume down by however many decibels I set here. Let's try 3 decibels to begin with so that it goes from -4 down to like -7, shall we? So now it's going to repitch it, but also bring it back in the mix a tiny little bit. Let's hear what that does to the sound. Get where we can hear it. All right, here we're going to roll it down now. That's nice. So now it's not too loud in the mix, but it just gives us this interesting adjustments that I can do in real time. Now that I've got things assigned to 2 knobs, we can do those 2 things at once, right? Roll this down, and 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, put them back now. Right? So this gives us lots of fun things to be able to assign anything in the mix we want and always have it available on the macros without having to worry about switching banks back and forth. Yeah, definitely. Hey Max, live music with Beatmaker 3 is very, very doable. Let's try something else. Let's see what we can do here. Let's see if maybe we could make it, you know, we've only got like 10 samples, not 10 rather, but 14 samples loaded that we've, you know, sampled into here. All of the sounds were sampled out of this vintage Quasimidi Quasar. We're just having fun and just, you know, doing some old school sampling and recording today. But what let's do is let's take let's take our main chord stab there at the top, and let's assign the tuning on that to a separate knob as well. Let's go ahead and macro is what I mean to say. Let's double click the tuning there. By default, it's at 0. We're going to go ahead and assign this to the second macro 2. And we're going to tell this that at its minimum state, that this should also be at 0. So when the knob is all the way down, it's not going to affect the sound. But when I roll the sound, let's make it so that it tunes our main chord sample up 1 full octave. And what I can do is I can rename this, and we can call this chord repitcher. Okay, spell it right maybe. Pitcher, I don't know if that's right or not, but we're going to go with it. And we're going to save. So now when let's see here. Get number 2 all the way up. I've already lost. Yeah, my connection today keeps spitting out for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I might need to replace this USB cable. But now we're back in, and then we've got macro 1. You know, when I move the knob, it's moving macro 1 and macro 2. When I move the knob, macro 2. Down here, we've still got the kick drum assigned. Okay, so if we play the groove now, there's no chords happening, but if we go to where there are some chords happening, and if I now roll the knob all the way down, right, see now I have pitch control over that chord, right, and I can do it even while it's playing, right? So now I'm just letting the groove sort of play, while at the same time I'm able to move these knobs. 1, 2. So we've got the start and the stop of Beatmaker 3 mapped over here, so I can press play or stop. I've got 3 of these knobs assigned to various things happening inside of Beatmaker 3 as we're going, but we actually have a full 16 macros here. We've got 8 on page 1, and we've got another 8 macros on page 2. So if we wanted to, we could just literally keep assigning things to knobs, keep sampling more things in. We could add up to 128 samples on the one bank alone. We just sort of need to keep in mind that we're running everything through one channel, and we want to do our best to keep the volumes in check so that we're not clipping on that one channel. Here, we're doing just fine on the volumes, no clipping at all, and all those sounds are still just coming out of this one channel, you know. And I've already lost the MIDI controller again. It's suddenly not, so I don't know what that's about. I may have a, you know, a less than optimal MIDI USB cable here. I'm not sure. But I think that is probably the universe letting me know that it's probably time to call it rather than just trailing on and on and on with this live stream today. I definitely want to give you guys a few moments though to ask any possible questions, whether they be Beatmaker 3 related or macro related or MIDI controller related or just music production in general related. So if you have any questions before we call the stream, now would be a fantastic time for those. We started with just some percussion today, a kick and a little bit of like a pumping percussion kind of groove. We sampled some claps, we sampled some hi-hats, we sampled bass sounds and chord sounds, a little impact sound, we sampled the shaker, all of these things into Beatmaker 3 in real time from the Quasimidi Quasar. I think this kind of a workflow is super, super fun and super easy. I mean, you know, it exists because it works, if you get my drift. If you've got a friend who has a synthesizer, you know, you can just take your iPad and, you know, right over there, record the sounds in, and suddenly, you know, now those are in, you know, your iPad. And it's a really awesome way if you're portable and you have friends who maybe have some better gear than what you've got. All right, we're just going to go ahead and play the groove a little bit, I think, and I'm going to check in the chat and see if there's any questions that need to be answered. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, basically, I really am getting a lot of use out of the Novation SL-MK3 because it's not only a MIDI controller, but it's also an 8-track standalone hardware sequencer. So you can, you know, connect this up to 8 individual pieces of hardware gear. You can assign all of the buttons and faders and knobs on this controller to talk to that specific piece of MIDI gear. Maybe you want, you know, these first 4 to be envelope controls on your synth that you're playing, attack, decay, sustain, release. Maybe you want this pad over here to be volume. Maybe these two, I said pad, maybe these 2 sliders to be faders rather, or sliders to be like filter cutoff and resonance, or a knob over here to change the preset on one of your synthesizers. So you can get really robust using their components software and get in and really customize what this is doing. I don't know of any hardware sequencers that exactly can do what this one can do, although I do really like the look of the Arturia, the new one, the KeyStep Pro, I believe. It's not the BeatStep. I think the new KeyStep Pro has like a lot of trigger outs on the back, which means it would not only be useful with your hardware gear, but also with Eurorack. the SL-MK3 does have two sets of CV, pitch, and modulation on the back of it, but that Arturia, controller sequencer has like 8 trigger outs, so you'd be able to trigger quite a few drum sounds, like right in your Euro rack from that. So depending on, if you're into Euro rack, those could be really useful as well. If you're not doing any kind of Euro rack, I can't think of a better, standalone hardware sequencer right now than the Novation SL-MK3, because you've got the keys built right in. It's a little bit larger than I would like it to be for me personally, but I find it really reliable and really awesome. You can actually program parts into what they consider sessions as well. So say this, if we were programming a bunch of synthesizers, we could have like scenes basically. We use their sessions as though they were scenes inside of Ableton or scenes inside of Beatmaker 3, where for instance, like session 1 would be like your intro pattern. And then when you hit this session 2 on the downbeat of the next measure, it will switch to a different, pattern. So you can have different scenes set up and ready to go with a sequencer like this as well. And you can, play things and live loop things in real time, which is always a bonus as well. You can yeah, absolutely. The especially the new circuit tracks, because it has 2 dedicated MIDI tracks on it. I actually have that here. I'm going to be making a lot of drum banks for this guy, but this is really similar as well in the sequencing as the Novation SL-MK3, because they're both Novation, duh. But what I mean is here you've got 2 tracks of external MIDI, or you can do 4 if you don't use their internal synthesizers, or you can even use all of these tracks to control external sounds, the drums as well. Like if you don't want to use any of the sounds in here and you just want to use it as a sequencer, you've got 4 melodic tracks and then 4 drum tracks. So this could actually be a really good hardware sequencer. And I like stuff that you can kind of use in more than one way. Like maybe this week we want to use it as just a hardware sequencer, but maybe sometimes we also would like to be able to use it as a synthesizer itself or as a drum machine itself, and we can do that with that one as well, because it has the ability to have its own synthesizers or load our own samples, whereas a standalone like this, it's just going to be a MIDI controller also. I think this is actually a little bit more expensive than the circuit. The circuit might be actually a really good, solid choice for a MIDI sequencer because it depends on how much gear you want to sequence, but because you can, use it fully functional as, a groove box, and then have 2 external MIDI tracks as well to sequence external gear. It's even got inputs where you can plug the external gear right into it, so you won't need an external mixer if you're only using like 1 or 2 devices of external gear as well. Absolutely. Yeah, this is the circuit tracks. It's the newer one. It's not the OG circuit. I have that one as well, but this one allows you to load a whole bunch of different like drum kits per se on the memory card, and then switch between those like really quickly and easily without having to assign connect it up to their component software on the computer. So you can go, like back and forth between different drum kits and sample kits, like just like that, which is super, super, super cool. Thanks for tuning in, Wall. Absolutely. I really appreciate you being here, and thanks for the support. Hey, thanks, Lawrence. I appreciate that. Yeah, if anyone wants to learn, like, go deeper with Beatmaker 3, I've got, a playlist with over 50 tutorials about how to really get in here deep. I think this app is really robust for any genres of electronic music, and you don't necessarily need to work in a sample only workflow, but I definitely find that that's a lot more stable than loading it up with tons and tons of virtual instruments and tons of plugins. The more brands of developers you get at the same time with their codes talking to each other, the more chance that there's, going to be a 0 that doesn't match somebody's 1, or a 1 that doesn't match somebody's 0, and you might get a crash or some sort of nonsense like that. but I find that specifically this type of a workflow with Beatmaker 3, I just really don't get crashes. You know what I mean? Um, all right. Well, I think we are going to go ahead and call it today. Wow, this might be the longest live stream to date. It looks like it's been 2 hours and 44 minutes. I really appreciate everyone, sticking around. Sometimes, producing takes a lot of time. I know a lot of people are on YouTube. YouTubers are into telling you got to do it fast, and here's a shortcut, and here's a shortcut, and here's a shortcut. But I'm, really just about kind of taking the time and having fun along the way. I mean, if you're not really interested in spending a couple hours at least on your stuff, if you only want to spend 5 or 10 minutes, this might not really be the hobby for you. Is kind of the way I look at it, and I like to spend the time and get in deep with this stuff. And so, yeah, if there's anything that you specifically want to know about Beatmaker 3, definitely check out my playlist because I've got everything in here on really detailed information about creative macro assignments and whatnot, to more creative patch design and creating actual playable patches from scratch. All that good stuff, and how to set up, more of these type of sessions in a live jam with the controller. That's hopefully not, disconnecting every couple seconds on you. Yeah, everyone has the right. Hey, if you're super fast, I don't have a problem with that. I just don't have that as a goal for my workflow personally. I don't have a lot of other hobbies really. This is what I'm about. Electronic music. So it's easy for me to spend my time. Um, okay, fantastic. I really appreciate all of your support and everyone tuning in, and we will definitely see you next Sunday again on another live stream every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be doing next week, but I'm sure it'll be geeky as hell. All right, thanks everyone. I really appreciate your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.